Well, good morning, everybody. We are recording now. If you're not speaking, I just ask that maybe you put your Zoom on mute. We'll get started. We've got a nice group attending today. We've had a great reunion so far in New York City for the Fall '97 team. Really want to welcome everyone for the Fireside Chat. Like I said before, it's our 25th anniversary, which feels amazing that this much time has passed. It's really been remarkable to see the personal and professional growth of all of our classmates who've been all kinds of different places around the world since semester at sea. Many have gone on to lead some very transformative work. We're excited to have Adriana and Betty Ann with us today. I'll have them do their own introductions momentarily. Very much excited for the dialogue today. We'll have some time for questions at the end from the audience. And I want to just thank you both, ladies, for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Excellent.
Thanks, Raj.
Of course. Maybe we'll start with Adriana. If you could talk a little bit, just maybe a couple minutes about your life, your career, early childhood experiences through semester C, and kind of what led you to where you are today.
Sure. Happy to. Let's see. Do I start from after we got off the boat, or I'll just give you the highlights? So I spent a lot of my time in the Bay Area. I went to undergrad at UC Davis, and I graduated with a degree in sociology and communications. And I know this is one of the questions that you had already set in stone for later in the interview, but I'll loop it in now because I think it's relevant. Semester in C was definitely a massive influence in my life and helping me sort of pave the path for the type of career I wanted. And that is the realization that I wanted to give back and pay it forward to people in need. And so while I was in college, I actually applied to the Peace Corps, and I got in to help basically build churches and hospitals and schools in Nicaragua. But there was a malaria outbreak. So unfortunately, I couldn't go to the Peace Corps. But I still had this like burning fire from within that, I really wanted to build something that helped give back. So I was doing a lot of brand marketing work and traveling around the world, and, ended up living in Singapore and in London and New York and Miami and different places. And I ended up in San Francisco. And that's where I started working at my first startup, which was called Gooba. And Gooba was a combination of like Netflix and YouTube combined a little bit before its time. And I was the only woman working there out of, 35 or so employees, and the only minority woman. And so every day I'd go into work and look around the room. And I mean, obviously I was treated differently, but the culture was just super, what we call bro-grammary. And I realized that I needed to create change because the tech industry was awesome. I was loving it, learning so much, really thought it was interesting. So I wanted more women and more diverse groups of people to be a part of this journey and all of the innovation that was happening in the Bay Area. So I launched Girls in Tech in 2007, and now we're in 47 countries in over 60 cities. And we have over 100,000 active members, and we continue to grow. So it's just really inspiring to work with so many talented, amazing women around the world. And one of the big missions that we have now is giving back to women in underdeveloped countries and making sure that they have the right devices and curriculum and resources to jump into the tech and learn how to code, become entrepreneurs, and have the mentorship that they need within their schooling and careers. So that's probably a little more than 2 minutes, but that's sort of what I've been doing in my career in a nutshell.
Thanks for that. And I like your idea of kind of kicking off with that semester C question now, because I think that's what brought us all together then and brought us all together this weekend. So Betty Ann, how about yourself? A little bit of background and also where semester C probably fit into your journey.
Yeah, thanks, Adriana. That was awesome. Totally impressed with where you guys are at. Amazing work. Yeah, for me, semester at sea was a seed that was planted in college. I was a college freshman at University of Oregon playing basketball. And I thought, how the heck am I going to get around the world when I'm trying to play D1 basketball and they want every minute of your life? So I planned it with Lori Grant Lee we were high school best friends, and we said, let's go around the world together. So we both saved 12 credits. And then at the end of playing college ball, and Lori had been a runner and she was at UC Davis, we ended up going on semester at sea. When I got home from semester at sea, I think my parents were kind of brushing it all off as like, okay, she got that travel out of her. And now she's going to get a real job. And instead that launched me into just a fascination with the world and a desire to do a master's in international conflict resolution, which is highly interesting, but highly unemployable. So I got done with that master's, and I started working for Stanford Travel Study and did alumni tours around the world, and ended up going to, I think they sent me to like 75 countries over a 3.5-year period. Just, didn't have any plants to water, no kids to feed. And I took these alumni around the world. And I really got a sense that when they got home, their experience overseas, they largely accredited to, well, Stanford did a great job of leading the travel. And so I will write a $500,000 check to Stanford. Well, I started seeing these groups on the ground that were doing incredible humanitarian work. And among them, I found International Justice Mission, which is now the largest anti-slavery organization in the world. And they were kind of some of the first people to be mentioning trafficking happening around the world. And what ended up happening is one of the founders came out to the Bay Area, and he was speaking at an event, and they had this posting of a West Coast job. And I didn't know where it would be, but he was just trying to get a restroom break, and I kind of intercepted him, and I said, I'm your gal from the West Coast. And so I started doing fund development and, kind of raising awareness about the fact that trafficking was happening around the world in the early 2000s. And this was just when it was enough for people to understand that it was happening all across Southeast Asia, that millions of kids were being taken into sex trafficking and all these brothels around the world that were visited by sex tourists across Asia and Africa. But then while I was doing that work, I started opening the paper, and there were brothel operations and raids in San Jose and San Francisco and all over the Bay Area. And then, so I just got a motley crew of friends together in 2011. And I said, let's bring awareness to the fact that this is happening in the Bay Area. Dr. Condoleezza Rice was our speaker. I knew somebody who could put in a good word for us, and she spoke. And then we brought in some musicians, and we ended up having almost 2,000 people show up for it. So at the time, it became the largest human trafficking community-based training in the country. And so that just really raised everybody's eyebrows to the fact that it was happening in the Bay. So even though our work kind of started regionally in the Bay Area, it soon became evident that every form of human trafficking that has been found in the entire US exists in the Bay Area, in the 9 counties. And so I'll talk a little bit today about some faces of human trafficking that some people might not realize are associated with the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. But I think that there was definitely a sense for me, excuse me, after semester at sea and the travel, that I wanted to bring this global awareness of an issue that was happening globally and really help people raise awareness that it was happening locally. And so that's kind of what I've continued to do. We're now throughout the Western US, just kind of raising awareness. And I'll tell a little bit more later on about my experience of going into San Quentin prison and interviewing some former traffickers that really informed our business plan. But we've now started something called Airport Initiative, and we're getting into train airport employees around the country about what it means to identify trafficking while you're traveling. And so by the end of today, I hope I can share with everybody a little bit of how they can actually train their eyes and ears with all the travel that we all do around the whole world about how you can both recognize and report trafficking and help really shut down this criminal activity. So I guess the big thing for me was, I think after a semester at sea, I stopped looking for like accomplishment or what was going to be my next thing or like what I was good at. And I actually started asking myself what kept me up at night. And it was really this issue of human trafficking kind of tearing at the moral thread of our very communities that we live in. And now as a parent, obviously just wanting to kind of mobilize people with empowerment around our young people and all the kind of social media predators that are out there, and how we protect and empower our young kids as opposed to react from fear and just say that we're never going to send them to the mall or a movie theater again. So that's what we do. And it's a very long fight and an ongoing work.
Thanks, Betty Ann. Yeah, I currently work for Vice Media, and one of the things we take great pride in is, telling the stories that aren't told. And some of the work you guys are both talking about really hits home for me. Adriana, I know you've built your organization, so it sounds like 2007, about 15 years, and we started to get a little bit of an understanding, through your intro about, why you got the organization off the ground, what motivated to get you there. But how'd you do it? How do you go from, an idea and a concept to 15 years later running this successful organization?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I had no idea how to build a nonprofit. I had no idea how to build a business. And I can simplify it to one thing, but I'm going to expand my answer and provide all the detail, but having a really good lawyer. So a really good attorney that can actually provide pro bono services, because I didn't realize this, but every major law firm, at least in the US, they are required to provide a certain amount of pro bono hours to people who are interested in nonprofits and building nonprofits, or just to nonprofits in general that they're really passionate about. And so I got a couple phenomenal introductions and just had friends as well. And so I had a couple attorneys help with trademarking, a couple attorneys help with developing the filing for the 501c3 nonprofit registration. One of the things that, I think was really, really important for me is sort of like Betty Ann, to really dig deep and really understand what keeps me up at night and really put that as the core focus for the organization, which was global expansion. Now, I wanted to make sure that this organization was international because, I was impacted by the disparities I was seeing in my personal travels, but also on semester at sea, because as you guys know, we got to go to a lot of developing countries and saw a lot of the sort of disparities in terms, the basics, food, shelter, clothing, but also education was an area that really, really interested me. And then now specifically tech. So that as the core focus, I created a business model that allowed for us to create a chapter model, essentially. So the headquarters were in San Francisco, and we piloted and tested all of our programs in San Francisco. And then once we were totally happy and the programs were making an impact in SF, then we would deploy them to other places. And we launched our second chapter in Los Angeles, our third chapter in New York, and our fourth chapter randomly was launched in Kuwait, of all places. So we had a chapter in Kuwait for about 10 years, and then our managing director stepped down. But it sort of grew like wildfire because tech was growing. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Facebook started being available to the world in 2007. So it's right when we launched and we were able to promote our mission, our website. I think Eventbrite was launched around the same time as well. So we got to promote a lot of our events. And as Betty Ann was saying, it all started out with one event. And we had about 200 women show up to a launch event that we did in San Francisco. It was at this dance club called Slide, but there's a slide to get down to the main place. So it was a friend's dance club, and he's like, yeah, totally use it if you want to. And I'm like, great. I had no idea what was going to become of it. It was just sort of like an initial sort of networking event to see like if women in tech really existed and if they would come out and wanted to get to know each other. So it was sort of like a networking event. I literally went to Costco and bought cheese and wine and was like cutting cheese and running around like a headless chicken. And then 200 women showed up. And I think that was the point in which, and I'm getting goosebumps telling the story, because that was the point in which I knew we were onto something. All the women that were in tech, really passionate, whether they were coders or product developers or designers or in marketing, they really just were passionate about innovation and about being in the tech industry. And they were sharing ideas, talking about issues, but also, you know, collaborating and talking about how they wanted to work together. And so all those conversations were so inspiring to me personally. And after that, I was just like, I have to do something. I can't just make this an organization of networking and wine and cheese. Obviously, like, education is super important to me, and I think it's needed in the industry, because a lot of things you don't learn in college, as we all know, especially in tech, because it's so fast paced and ever changing. So I brought together a variety of friends, from venture capitalists to professors at Stanford and Berkeley to serial entrepreneurs. And, you know, we had this little consortium of really passionate people who donated a lot of their time to me and to the organization to start building curriculum. So it started out with a coding class in Ruby on Rails, and then we built out a lot more to like entrepreneurial programming. We have a mentorship program. We have a hackathon series. Our recent hackathon series was created to build apps for the refugees in Ukraine. So there's a lot of social good that we do as well. We have a startup challenge, which is a business pitch competition for women. And our big conference that we do annually, sort of like a mini Grace Hopper that we're producing in Nashville on September 7th, which you're all invited to if you're coming through. But that's sort of really how I started. I feel like, you know, there wasn't a specific equation. I think having the registration and having the right sort of people behind me, and I think that's what one of the beauties of living in the Bay Area is, that there's so many people willing to help me build this organization, so many people wanting me to succeed, so many people understanding the need and the disparity of, you know, the gap within our gender within the STEM fields. So they wanted to reach out and use their resources on a pro bono basis, which was really amazing and inspiring. So that's sort of how it all started. And like I said, we're now a global organization. We just had a retreat in France, and we had about 27 of our managing directors come out, which is always inspiring to see, because a lot of these women, I mean, they're all volunteers around the world, and a lot of them have been with me for close to 10 years, right? We just had our 15-year anniversary in February. So it's been an amazing ride, and we still have our work cut out for us. So yeah.
It's a great history and a great story of how to get off the ground and all the work you guys have done. I wanted to shift gears a little bit in terms of kind of the origin story to what's happening next, and what's, you know, how you measure success in your organization. So maybe flip over to Betty, and if you could talk a little bit about, you know, obviously a massive challenge your organization is taking on. How do you measure impact? How do you measure, you know, what's working, what's not working, and when to shift gears?
Such a great question, Raj. Especially with something like trying to fight the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. You can imagine people want metrics, they want numbers, they want to know, you know, kind of how to think about this. So I think one thing that we've done is that from the very get-go, I mean, people know me to be I've always played team sports. I always enjoy, if I learn something, I kind of turn around and I hope that I can bring 20 people along to learn it with me. And I think from the beginning of our efforts around a movement of fighting trafficking, first it was naming some of the obvious things you're coming up against, right? So understanding that this is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world, that traffickers are very well networked. I mean, talk about tech and about the use of technology, right, to run this criminal business. We're talking about $150 billion industry a year that traffickers are making off this business. So a lot of people will get hung up on the evil and the darkness of it. But the reality is that these traffickers are making a bunch of money. So I think sometimes when you work, like for me, in a very emotional space around trauma and abuse, it's very interesting to try and help people build a framework of understanding, so that then when they hear the traumatic stories, or they hear something from their hometown or where they live now, or something that happened to a family they know, they have a framework to hang it on. And so I think for us, building that framework of traffickers are really well networked, we need to be well networked. I told you I had a background in conflict resolution. We saw all these little nonprofits popping up, and they all said they fought trafficking. Well, we had to realize that some of the best models to fight trafficking started overseas because they actually were naming this in their communities much sooner than America was. So instead of like an idea that was birthed here and then goes around the world, it was more about adopting ideas around the world, being open to a global perspective that could actually teach us how to fight it in the States. That's kind of backwards sometimes to the entrepreneurial spirit I know in Silicon Valley where I live. But then the other thing was kind of as we were then building this, I think what we had to hold, and I feel like most nonprofits have to deal with this, is that there's almost like the movement side of what you do. People want to feel like they're part of a community. They want to feel like they're part of an army that is maybe fighting a very large issue, or that they're trying to get the tide to turn on something very large. It's hard to, even with the issue of human trafficking and how many human rights abuses it involves, right? There's so much around refugee crises, smuggling, immigration, all that people, it can just get very big for people, and they just kind of roll their eyes back and they're like, good for you that you work on that. And I think my invitation to folks has been to say, no, this is such a large issue that if you give me 5 minutes, I will sit down and talk to you about how you're connected to it. So about purchases that you make, about food that you buy that's, chocolate, coffee, rice, tea, things that are actually made by slaves overseas that get shipped into your local grocery stores. Talking about clothes we buy, and things that are happening with our corporations, and the ways that you can actually look at supply chain things and encourage companies now to not, have slavery in their supply chain. There's something called slaveryfootprint.org, and it's just like evaluating your carbon footprint. You can actually go on Slavery Footprint and put in how much you own of certain tech devices and things like that. And it will give you a number at the end that is an estimation of how many people are held in exploited labor around the world based on what you own. And it's not a number that's meant to shame you. It's a number that's meant to help you then click on some things from that very site and actually start to lower your slavery footprint, just like you'd lower your carbon footprint. So I think we're trying to put it in a framework for people that we're fighting something that in and of itself is a business. Thanks, Angie, for posting that website. It's a business that we have to disrupt, and so when you say kind of how do you look at metrics, how do you evaluate success, I think as we had people onboarding about almost like a passion project of like, I want to fight trafficking, it was very much that we had to break it down for them and help them with this framework thinking. And then we also had to say, you're coming to me and you're saying, okay, Betty Ann, I'm ready to fight the largest, fastest growing criminal activity in the world. We broke it down for people and we're like, are you somebody that's about prevention and advocacy, and you might be a teacher or somebody that really wants to like spread the word about this? Are you somebody that could work on intervention? Are you a lawyer? Are you a police officer? Are you somebody with any kind of law enforcement background that you actually want to go like talk to people who are possible victims, that you want to find brothels in your community, stuff like that? And then there's the aftercare world, which is like, are you a counselor? Are you a lawyer? Do you want to help provide language services, anything like that for victims of trafficking? So I think breaking down the issue for people help them say, okay, this is my bucket where actually my time, talent, and resource could make the most impact. And so for me, when we started out, it was first collaborating everything that was happening in the region and trying to get everybody to be like basically networked, just like the traffickers were networked. And then the second piece was landing people in a smaller bucket of organizations and good work that would connect them to the issue for a longer period of time. Because I'm telling you, if you come into trafficking and you're just like, I'm ready to fight this thing, you like watch 3 YouTube videos and 2 movies and you look at 2 websites and you're completely bolted to your chair in despair. And you're just like, whoa, I'm just going to like go build a house on a Saturday. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like much more contained. Nothing against housing. Believe me, I lean into that. But I'm just saying that on an issue like trafficking, it's been very important to break it down for people. And so then the next evolution of that and where we're headed from here is to actually look at trafficking as a business, to say that these former traffickers who I spoke to in San Quentin, they're the ones that said, you may be a great trainer and you're helping people get their eyes and ears trained, but you got to take it to where I run my business. Where are the places of transportation that I have to move my victims every day to make my profits and get them to the business clients I have? Where do you, what apartments do they stay in when they sleep? What about where they work? What hotels do I move them to? So that kind of thing, right? So move, work, sleep. So our model now is to ask people, where do you maybe intersect that cycle? And where do you go to a coffee shop and you think you see something sketchy that you could report something? What about living in an apartment and everybody always asks you, where's number apartment 13 at like 2 a.m. You see people coming and going. You know, I talk to people and they're like, what about that one house in my neighborhood that's got all the cars? You know, before COVID, we used to say, watch for kids doing all sorts of labor during the day when they should be in school. That's a possible yellow flag. Raj and I were just talking this morning about a magazine salesman that came to my door. And when I pressed him on why he was selling this and what was going on, he said, well, what if it's not magazines I'm really selling? And he was prostituting himself to the women in Redwood City to possibly make the quota that he needed to make that day so that he wouldn't be abused that night or be told that he wouldn't get anything to eat. So it comes out that all these different forms of peddling and smuggling and begging rings and things like that are all connected. Magazine sales, all sorts of kinds of trafficking exists that we didn't know were connected to, where that person might not be so much a criminal, like where, I don't know if everybody's on Nextdoor, right? But a magazine salesman crew goes in a neighborhood and all of a sudden on Nextdoor, everybody's like, hey, everybody, so-and-so, like somebody just got their car broken into. It's not necessarily that magazine salesman just saw an iPhone sitting in a car and decided to steal it. It's because they have the pressure on them to make $300 a day. Otherwise, they will be beaten or not given a place to eat. So we have to turn our mindset a little bit sometimes, or we hear about, sex workers and we realize, wow, 9 out of 10 sex workers have said, if I could get out of this way of life, I would, but so-and-so is profiting off me. And we have to understand that these are emotional and mental chains that are keeping people in trafficking, not physical chains a lot of times. So they move and work within our community and we don't even know it's happening unless we have an eye that's attuned to it. So Raj, the question about like measuring success, I think we would say that right now there's a national hotline for human trafficking. We look at how many calls come into that. That's polarisproject.org is a great resource for the 35 different kinds of human trafficking that are found in the United States. And people call that national hotline or they call local authorities if they see something. So those numbers are very interesting, how they have increased, huge increase in human trafficking during COVID. And those numbers are being kind of formulated right now. But I think we look from a local community response. I love what Adriana said, and I'm sorry I'm going on a little bit long here, but Adriana, the chapter mentality and this idea of that you actually get people in their local community to say what they can do and who's interested and what works, and then taking that chapter model elsewhere. A lot of these bigger issues we're trying to fight, they have to be fought on a locality. They have to land on a geography. So for somebody to just say, I'm going to take what I did and then become this national thing, it really starts by people being engaged and being able to know what to do right in their very home community. And then those chapters start building the response that you have.
Thanks so much. I'm just digesting kind of all the information. And Angie, thanks for putting those links out there. And we'll get some follow-up information out to everyone in the group today, and then to the broader alumni group after the session. Just shifting gears a little bit. You both mentioned kind of the global aspects of your work. Adriana, where's your work taking you? You mentioned the retreat, and then kind of how do you kind of reach out to these new organizations in new countries? What makes you decide to enter a new market? And along the way, have you been back to any of the places we went during our voyage, and what differences did you see if so?
Yeah. Wow, those are like a lot of questions in one. I would say that, so in terms of scaling the organization, we have a strategy every year. And we have different reasons to launch chapters in different areas. And as I was mentioning earlier, one of the major goals is to provide resources to developing countries, places that need it the most. So we've been looking at regions, countries in Africa, for instance, and countries in the Middle East. One story I like to tell is, in Pakistan, we were trying to launch a chapter, and the U.S. Department of State wanted to support our programming for women that actually were university graduates. and their male counterparts, husbands, did not want them to have jobs or expand their education or get certain resources or mentorship. And so they ended up putting together like what we would consider a Tupperware party from the 1950s. And they went into this underground cave and took one of our like coding classes there, which I thought was really obviously very empowering, very inspiring, but also, you know, risky, right? Because in many cases, women, we're dealing with issues that are much greater than education. You know, there's oppression, there's social justice issues, there's human rights issues, and we're seeing that come at us, you know, in full force, especially when there's issues like the tragedy in Ukraine and, you know, with the war with Russia, right? We're seeing a lot of people come at us and say, you know, we really want your support. We want to expand the education. We want to get a chapter here. And so we're working not just in tech, we're working, you know, in human rights and social justice to help these groups have a voice, right? So I think, Betty Ann, you alluded to this. There's a lot of crossover between nonprofits and the work that we do based on the awareness and awakening of what's really going on, you know, when you open the kimono. And one thing, and this is probably going on a tangent, but one thing that is I'm really passionate about, and Betty Ann, you mentioned San Quentin. So I'm not sure when this happened in my career. I don't know if it was influenced by Semester at Sea, but I'm really passionate about criminal justice reform. And I feel the country is just a downward spiral when it comes to this particular topic. And I met this organization called Banyan Labs and learned more about them. And what they do is teach coding classes to coding and design type classes, technology oriented classes to inmates. So to incarcerated women and men who want vocational skills. So when they leave the prison system, they can have a job. And that's the number one issue is rehabilitation of these people. Like they want a second chance. They want a third chance in some cases. So I had a conference call with them because they wanted to partner with Girls in Tech. And you know, we have our work cut out for us. We have so much work going on around the world. So I'm like, partnerships are very difficult for us to take on, but this one in particular stood out. And on the conference call, unbeknownst to me, there's 5 people calling in from jail, from San Quentin. And these women were so, I mean, they each had their own story, but very emotional and very grateful for the fact that we wanted to partner with them and give them appropriate sort of mentoring within their career, get them involved in our digital career fairs so that they can be matched up with tech companies so that they can get jobs, take some of our Python coding classes. A lot of them wanted to get into data science, for instance. And the reason why I mention this is because there's such great intersectionality within these nonprofits that it was very, very eye-opening that we could take this model and make impact in other places so easily. And so now we have this full-fledged partnership with them, and we're working with these female inmates in particular to provide these resources to them. We're giving them all this pro bono support. So for example, they have a booth at our conference. Banyan Labs has a booth. We're inviting a lot of these inmates to come and participate, like reintegrate them into society, treat them like human beings, not give them handouts, but give them vocational skills so that they can get back on their feet and get that job, feel self-sufficient, feel like they're part of the community. And that's something that's like re-inspiring me. And I think that does sort of connect back into how inspired I was initially at Semester at Sea, seeing all these wonderful people do wonderful things and see like clearly there was a need for more nonprofits. And I'm drawing a blank on the question, but I feel like this story in particular, because I want like everyone on this call to be involved in Girls in Tech and to this project in particular, there's ways that we can all help out. There's ways in which we can always get involved in these types of engagements, even like mentoring. Like you guys are all awesome and have done so much in your careers and have a lot of skills and experience. And so we're always looking for people who want to give back, a few hours over a 3-month period to mentor up and coming talent, right? So there's always ways to give back to communities that need it. So I'm sorry, I totally went on a tangent, Raj.
No, you're fine.
but did you want me to address anything in particular?
No, just kind of, general curiosity about, has any of your work taken you to any of the places we visited on our voyage? And have you kind of seen that, hey, I was here 25 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever the time period was, and wow, this is what it's changed.
Yeah, I would say, yes. So I did a lot of, I lived in Singapore, so I did a lot of work in Southeast Asia, Singapore, Laos, and let's see, where were we in Vietnam and Philippines, and Cambodia was a big one. I spent a lot of time there. And so it was just great to be able to launch the organization and customize it based on the cultural nuances that exist there. So it was a huge learning curve for me. I visited new places that we didn't get to go to on semester at sea, like South Africa. And that's always been so intriguing to me, just the continent, and learning more how to launch a nonprofit in that continent, because there's a lot of corruption. And so in terms of fundraising and being taken seriously in African countries has been very challenging. I would say more so in the central countries versus the north, because we successfully launched in like Morocco and Egypt. And, I always tell the story about our Egypt experience, which always leaves jaws to the ground. But it's really, it's all sort of like a sociological experiment in a way, because we're learning so much about these different cultures and needs. I would say, to go back to your original question, the biggest shift I saw was in China, where in 97, people were still like literally in rickshaws and bikes and little mopeds, and people playing mahjong, in the little alleyways and like, the wet markets, and everything was so different. Like, and then when I went back, I think it was probably like 10 years later, night and day difference, right? There's cars everywhere, a lot of smog, a lot of innovation happening. There is still a need for an organization like Girls in Tech there, but it was just really different. I just felt like the culture changed so much. Like there was such a need, a race to become so westernized that they were losing a little bit of that culture, that beauty of China that I loved that first time that we had all went. And that was my first time there in 97, which is a phenomenal experience. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Raj, could I piggyback on one thing Adriana said? I think I love the mentorship call to action, Adriana. And one of the things I was thinking of is a lot of people on this call and our interest in just what we could bring to nonprofits we know of in our community or around the world. And I think a lot of people at this age where we're at, right? We're just five years out. No, just kidding. I think a lot of us are like, how do I get more involved, and where could I lend myself to an organization? And I think a lot of times my friends come up to me and they're like, my next goal is to like be on this board, and not just volunteer, but like be on some boards, right? And I think that one thing we can remember is that, or just be reminded of, is a lot of people call it now like what's their passion project on the side. And for some reason, I'm kind of like uncomfortable by that comment, because in some ways it feels like, well, it just kind of only fits in when I have time to actually explore my passion, versus being like, this is something I'm going to be about, right? Not something we like put on in the morning, but like more of like how my heart thrives. And I think we get back to, like Adriana said, that inspiration from semester at sea. So I just want to offer that folks that are looking to either scale up their involvement in a nonprofit or get on a board, that it's less about maybe like your passion for an issue. And I think there can be more of a consideration of what skills do you bring. And one of the things that we bring is like our cultural competency from having been in countries around the world, that international global citizen scope can actually really help a lot of local nonprofits that are just like kind of in their little bubble, in their silo. They're like, here's who we are. And like understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion, all that stuff. I think we bring a lens of that just by our life experience. And so I guess I would encourage everybody, if you're thinking of a board position or whatnot, think about what skills you can bring to the board, like whether it's accounting or you like to fundraise or you want to, you do want to bring this cultural competency piece. Keep it in mind of what skills you bring as opposed to just, I'm passionate about that issue. You might be surprised what boards you end up on and what voice you're able to have. So I just wanted to add that.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight, Betty Ann. I know we're approaching the top of the hour, but I'd love to open it up for questions. We've got a number of folks here. Anyone have questions like to have for Adriana or for Betty Ann?
And Raj, you might have to repeat them because like the way I'm watching it on my phone, I can't quite see all the questions. So.
Sure thing, we'll do.
I have a question for Betty Ann.
Cross panel, let's do it.
Yeah, no, I'm just really curious how your organization plays a role in rehabilitating the women that are being trafficked. I mean, I think obviously flagging the issue, obviously putting the people in jail that need to be in jail. I mean, that's an understanding, like in San Francisco, a lot of the massage parlors, I heard that a lot of them were caught for that, which is severely disturbing because I walk by some of them, I used to walk by some of them every day. But I'm curious, like how you really rehabilitate these women, because they don't have anything, right? And they don't have money, resources. Some people were like plucked from their families. Like, I'm just curious.
Thanks, Adriana. Yeah, so a lot of the women and men that we work with, a lot of them need legal representation. And you mentioned having a good lawyer. Some of it has been building up the pro bono efforts for victims of trafficking themselves from the standpoint of criminal expungement. A lot of them were asked to do criminal activity while they were being exploited. A lot of them do need to know that there's going to be a consequence for their trafficker, right? If some of the sentences are super light. I am all about prison reform with you. But when it comes to this kind of violent crime, like in the state of California, there's way heavier, kind of times in prison for kidnapping and rape. But this is rape and kidnapping on an ongoing basis, right? But like a trafficker will get like 3 years or 5 years. Well, there's a lot of victims who are like, I'm not going to get up there and tell my story if he's going to get out in 3 years and kill my whole family. So I think there's an understanding that there is a brutality and a brainwashing that most of the efforts in the anti-trafficking world for once victims are found is like an 18-month period of like counseling and emergency housing. And if any of us had that kind of trauma happen to us, 18 months would be like maybe the first time we want to step out and like go to a grocery store, right? Like we're not recovered in any way. This is a lifelong rehabilitation and a lifelong reintegration. So I think we try and meet the basic needs of the victims that we work with. They want to be a voice in the anti-trafficking movement, a lot of them. I think we need to honor survivor voice. I think we get them into positions. We have a great group I want to connect you with called Annie Cannons that actually has human trafficking survivors who now do tech. They do web development in the Bay.
Oh, wow.
And so teaching them job skills. And I think a lot of times, quite honestly, in the Bay Area, we'll be like, oh, well, does everybody want to do coding? And a lot of these gals, they might want to be a hairdresser or something like that too. So we need to like listen to what their skill sets are and what they want to do. But we have to get them also into viable housing. And that's super hard in a lot of metropolitan areas. We're like in the Bay, we in a lot of these rehabilitation programs for victims of trafficking, they'll like make jewelry. I'm like, I don't know about you, but like I wouldn't be able to pay for my apartment in the Bay or whatever, right? If I was making jewelry all year. So we have to be real about the very physical and just everyday needs of survivors and have services come around those. And a lot of those are not going to be provided by state-run things. That's where nonprofits really step in. So I think we largely work to any survivors we work with. We get them plugged in with folks. We'll first help them with housing, healthcare, dental, childcare, and a job. And those groups are pretty well networked now in the regionality that we're in. The Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, what we do with more of the frontline training of employees that might see trafficking every day, we're a little bit more on that intervention side of things, where we're like looking at people that could be trained to identify and report it, because it is kind of just happening right under the surface. But we would say that most people just first need to do the step of learning more about what trafficking actually is to be able to spot it, right? So we have to understand it's not just happening to girls, it's also happening to boys and men. This happens in construction and elderly care just as much as it happens in massage parlors and sex businesses like sex work. But it's not just happening to foreign nationals, it's happening to American citizens. 90% of the kids that we help that are trafficking victims under 18 are American citizens. They're not foreign nationals. And then we just have to understand that it's not just happening there, it's happening here, right? So for us, a lot of it is getting over the educational hump of understanding what trafficking is and the scope of it. But then when it is so big and it's gotten really large for people, kind of how to say, let's not talk about trafficking as the new thing that's happening. Let's talk about all the groups that could be brought around the table who work with marginalized communities who are being trafficked. So think of trafficking as a verb, and like foster care, LGBTQ youth, all sorts of homelessness and after school programs and mentorships and all that play into helping people not become victims in the first place. And that's where we'd obviously love to go with it. Because anytime we go to these places that have like 6 beds, 8 beds, trying to meet the needs of human trafficking survivors, it's an uphill battle with how many at-risk people we have for trafficking around the world based on economic poverty and other push-pull factors. So I just want to point out that, we kind of try and go upstream and ask how we can help these folks who have been marginalized not become victims in the first place.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I love when I do panels like this and the panelists start to engage with each other. It makes it a lot more fun for everybody.
Yeah.
I know we're at the top of the hour, and I know it's a lot of people have a lot of places to be. But thank you both for joining. I just thought maybe to wrap up, Betty Ann, Adriana, if you could each think about, what we could do to help, what we could engage. If you want us to, leave the meeting, what, 2 or 3 things you want us all to take away from your discussion today. So maybe start with Betty Ann.
Thanks, Raj. I mean, I really would love to encourage everyone. We have a 10-minute training online. It's just at baatc.org/freedom. It's called our Freedom Flyer. And with everybody on this call, I mean, I'd love to see who's got the most freaking flyer points from all over the world. I'm sure it would be an impressive number, but this is our Freedom Flyer program that is for any time you're in airports, how you could recognize and report trafficking. And it really does make a difference because we're trying to train the employees to actually understand that when they get dressed for work every day, they're in a unique position to possibly help someone. It's baatc.org/freedom. That stands for Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition.org. But as I've mentioned, our airport work has brought us across the nation. So anyway, if anybody like Lee is in the airline industry, if anybody knows of an airport in their community that you'd like us to come train, happy to do that. But again, it's a 10-minute training. And I guess I always want to leave with empowerment on this. Many of us are parents or have nieces and nephews. And there's so much about online grooming and what's happening with young people meeting somebody online. And they've mentioned they're disgruntled about being at home during COVID, et cetera. And they get an offer to fly across country to go join a gaming circle or what seems to be a modeling engagement or whatnot. And there's just a lot of deception there. And a lot of kids leaving home to follow something that they, met somebody first on Facebook, and they're ending up in these trafficking rings. So I really encourage everyone not only to just know how you could recognize it while traveling, but go to polarisproject.org and our organization, baatc.org, and just learn more so that you can feel empowered. I'm always here for questions as well, and you can find that on our website. But we are in our 12th year, and we recently have kind of celebrated our 10 years and told our 10-year story too. So you can find that on our website. But grateful to share with all of you because really it was something that was birthed out of an understanding of just traveling the world and then trying to bring some of that to our home communities and understand the intersection points with such a global epidemic.
Thanks so much. We'll get a note out afterwards to, like I said, everyone in the group with the links and some of the information from
Thanks.
both these organizations. How about yourself, Adriana? Any closing thoughts you want us to leave from the session today?
Yeah, I would say that just find someone to mentor. You know, I think mentorship and sponsorship goes a really, really long way. And I know we're all super busy and have a lot of, you know, projects and family and social life and everything else. But if you just take some time to mentor somebody that can really, really help them in their careers and in life. And, you know, it helped me. I had two amazing mentors that really believed in me, two Latina women. And, you know, they didn't just make it easy for me to learn.
I'm sure no one's had that happen to them in the last 2 years at all, right?
Never.
Or a call or anything like that. That's never happened to any of us.
Sorry, he's very protective. This is a very dog-friendly hotel I'm at. Let's see if he calms down. Taco, stop it. I would just say that, like, mentorship is so important, and it really helped me in my career. And I would just, you know, you guys have a wealth of experience, and just believing in someone and being there for someone can really help change their trajectory and their path in their career.
Thanks so much for that. Well, guys, it's been awesome to have you both. Thank you so much for making the time on your Saturday to join us, and for everyone who attended. Like I said, we'll get the links out with some of the background information and the information that was shared today. And for everyone who's still in New York, we'll see you at the High Line in a couple hours, and then we'll make our way towards the Circle Line ferry for the cruise. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your Saturday.
Awesome. Nice to see everyone.
Bye.
Great to see everybody.
Bye.
See ya.